Dan Bilzerian, everyone's least favorite playboy, has been exposed many times for lying about where his money came from, the houses he didn't buy, his SEAL training, his poker skill, and much more. Dan is quite a destructive force, but only to himself. His promotion of the ultimate hedonistic lifestyle, while cringe, didn't have any victims, and as we'll see, he only entered the course selling game recently as he is broke and desperate for money. The true untold story is the man behind Dan, the criminal using Dan as his puppet for the past decade, the real owner of Dan's company Ignite. The SEC is after him, and he's bringing Dan down with him and exposing Dan as an even bigger joke than we thought. Let's dive in. The criminal mastermind behind Dan is his father, Paul Bilzerian, the mustache before the iconic jawline beard. Paul Bilzerian is no joke. In the 1980s, this Harvard-educated corporate raider oversaw a series of takeovers that netted him millions of dollars. Here's Dan talking about his father.
Yeah, I don't know all the charges. It was like, some 13D violations, stock parking. It was like him and Michael Milken, and they were like the guys that were being made an example of. And
basically, Bilzerian Sr. would purchase large stakes in distressed companies with the threat of taking them over. Either way, they would sell to him or they would sell to another entity at a much higher stock price, allowing Bilzerian to cash out for millions in profit. To hide his takeover intentions, he would engage in the illegal practice of stock parking, where he would have others purchase stock for him that he would buy back later, thus hiding the true size of his ownership stake. YouTube and crypto gurus can scam victims and get away with it, but the SEC doesn't mess around. In 1989, Bilzerian was found guilty on 9 counts of securities and tax fraud. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison and in the subsequent civil case ordered to pay $62 million in profits. Fast forward 20 years later, and the government has only been able to collect $3.7 million, and they are not happy about it. He now owes the government $180 million after accounting for all of the interest. So how has Paul Bilzerian managed to hide his money from the US government for over 2 decades? Well, thanks to Florida's homestead exemption, it was easy to hide some of the funds. Bilzerian and his wife bought land and built a 28,000 square foot mansion near Tampa, Florida in the early 1990s and immediately benefited from Florida's constitutional right to protect one's home from most creditors. Specifically, Article 10, Section 4A1 states, "There shall be exempt from forced sale under process of any court, and no judgment, decree, or execution shall be a lien thereon except for the payment of taxes and assessments." But the mansion only cost them several million. So where did the rest go? Roughly $50 million had to go somewhere, and that's where Dan comes in. It's pure speculation, but poker would have been a great way to have Dan launder the money, especially considering that many professional poker players have doubted Dan's poker skill.
All in all, while Dan did play very aggressive, I wouldn't say that he played all that great. In fact, there was some serious button clicking going on in this match. I think that maybe he could beat some high stakes, very soft live games, but on the internet, he's a fish in the water.
The claim that he was raking from whales in private games is slightly more believable until you realize that wealthy people hate losing money. And the minute Dan started winning big, he likely would have been kicked out of these games. Poker sounds like a great way to launder the money, but also an obvious way to get caught. Enter Dan's company, Ignite. Despite years of burning cash and poor management, it at least appeared to be Dan's company, with Dan being a legitimate but incompetent businessman. Turns out that may all have been just a charade. Dan Bilzerian's dad can't quit the fraud game. SEC alleges Dan was merely a puppet figurehead LARPing as CEO. Not surprising, a lifetime party boy would be clueless about business. It's sad that his entire identity is being an Instagram celebrity. Real businessmen don't have time to constantly indulge in all the partying. They barely have time to dine out. But if you're short on time, you don't have to sacrifice quality. That's why I partner with today's sponsor, Cook Unity, America's #1 chef-crafted meal delivery service. Cook Unity is the first chef-to-consumer platform delivering freshly prepared, pre-selected meals right to your door weekly. The first meal I selected in this batch is Mission-style chicken burrito made by Chef Jose Garces. One thing I love is it includes the macros on the packaging. Let's try it. The best part is they're easy to reheat and it makes you feel just like a professional chef. This is way better than anything I can cook. Cook Unity meals are seasonal and locally sourced whenever possible, meats that are humanely raised and free of antibiotics and hormones, and there's over 4,000 meals to choose from. These meals fit perfectly because I just got home from the gym and needed something quick. Tonight is chicken pesto penne with ricotta made by Chef Dustin Taylor, over 50 grams of protein. Meals are tailored to various dietary preferences, including vegan, paleo, and gluten-free options. Being able to quickly make delicious meals like chicken, potatoes, baby kale salad by just throwing it in the oven makes my day so much easier and allows me so much more time to work on videos like the one you're watching right now. Cook Unity is super flexible with you too. Subscribers can pause, skip weeks, or cancel anytime. This Ecuadorian chicken with plantains and rice was so good that I might move to Ecuador just to have some more. Go to cookunity.com/Spencer50 or click the link in the description down below and use my code Spencer50 to get 50% off your first order of Cook Unity meals. Try them out for yourself. Uber is worth $80 billion. It has never had a profitable month since it started, and it lost over $5 billion in one quarter last year. Dan clearly knows nothing about business if he thinks Ignite is comparable to Uber, a company burning cash to monopolize a market with future sights on self-driving cars, along with 150 million monthly active users. So it appears that Bilzerian Sr. used Dan's company Ignite to hide his money. He concealed his ownership and any involvement in Ignite until the SEC finally caught him. SEC charges Ignite and Bilzerian with scheme to falsely inflate revenues. The SEC has indicted Paul Bilzerian and Ignite on charges of false invoices, hiding his ownership stake and involvement in operations, parking money owed to the government, etc. Surprisingly, Dan Bilzerian is not listed as a defendant. How could this possibly be? His father, Paul Bilzerian, COO and President John Schaefer, CFO Paul Dowdle, and International Investment CFO Scott Roletter are all listed as defendants, but not Dan. From late 2020 to 2021, Ignite engaged in a scheme orchestrated largely by recidivist Bilzerian, who controls Ignite, to fraudulently report revenue. In January 2021, the company reported revenue of about $7.9 million for the fourth quarter of 2020, which, as Ignite noted, exceeded revenue for the previous 3 quarters combined. Most of the purported fourth quarter revenue, however, existed only as 3 fraudulent invoices. In 2021, Ignite and International Investments entered a sham transaction to keep the fraudulent 2020 revenue in Ignite's audited financial statements. However, Company 1 refuses to confirm the fraudulent invoices. These false invoices total $5.1 million. The plan was to book the sale to International Investments in 2020, issuing a backdated December 2020 new invoice for about $4.6 million. International Investments would apply this amount against convertible debt that Ignite purportedly owed International Investments. We can only speculate, but since the SEC conducts very thorough investigations, they must have found nothing on Dan. But Dan is the owner and CEO of Ignite. He must have known this was going on, right? Because if he was unaware of this illegal activity, it must mean he was hardly CEO at all. The trust fund kid was merely LARPing as CEO this whole time. He was just the face of the company, a hedonistic party boy doing nothing with his life other than spending his father's ill-gotten money. On the outside, Dan seems to have the life all guys dream of, but many of these rich trust fund kids are miserable, and now he's broke. Former employee Curtis Heffernan sued Dan for wrongful termination, whistleblower retaliation, and defamation. In the lawsuit, he reveals all the dirty details about where the money went. Dan spent all of Ignite's money on a yacht rental, a $75,000 paintball field, a rock climbing wall, a gaming room, and a theater projector, to name a few. Many of his assets weren't assets at all, they were rented. He spent $200,000 per month on his home rental. This channel even changed their video title to add the word rented. The details of his car rental lawsuit are hilarious. Pursuant to the terms of the contract, defendant paid the sum of $3,250 for the rental of the Lamborghini and further charged to his MasterCard credit card a damage deposit in the sum of $10,000. 2 days after renting the Lambo, the company received a GPS alert that Dan was both speeding over 131 miles per hour and over-revving the engine in their vehicle. This broke the terms of their rental contract. They then went to the racetrack to take back the Lambo and discovered the engine was inoperable. He also caused body damage to the vehicle. So of course they immediately took the car back and charged Dan the $10,000 that he put down as a deposit for damages. So what did Dan do? He disputed the charges with his credit card company and got all the money back. And that's not all Dan did with his credit card. The report flagged significant unusual transactions by Ignite, such as a short-term promissory note for $15 million with an entity whose principal shareholder is a former director of Ignite, significant expenses put through on a private credit card from Dan Bilzerian. So what were some of these business expenses that Dan was charging to the company credit card? A $50,000 bed frame, an $88,000 vault, a charge for leftover liquor from Valentine's party of $18,000, an unexplained charge for a flight from Las Vegas to London of $104,000, thousands of dollars for transportation of models as defendant Bilzerian's guests, an excessive charge for a Bahamas photo shoot of $130,000. My favorite charge listed was for a $65,000 acquisition of 4-element guns and Star Wars set. During a budget call with Paul Bilzerian and other board members, the plaintiff highlighted the fact that Ignite was struggling to break even and could no longer support these personal expenses, the largest being the $200,000 a month Bilzerian rental home. At that point, defendant Bilzerian jumped in as the chairman of the board and said, "I'm going to be doing some summer pool parties and will utilize the house." The next day, during a company meeting, Bilzerian falsely accused plaintiff of taking drugs and acting strange, and the day after that, they fired the plaintiff. The case file has not been released yet, but it's reported that Ignite has filed for bankruptcy and Dan is now broke. I first began questioning his financial situation when I saw that his house here in Vegas was listed for sale 2 months ago. I found his mortgage info and saw that he took out a loan of $5 million last October against the house. I don't think he would do this to better allocate his equity, since he could have done it 2 years prior when rates were 80% less and alternate investment returns were higher. My guess is it was an injection of much needed capital into his lifestyle. So with all the money spent, Dan finally decided to join the course selling game. In true cringe fashion, he calls it Sigma Society, where he teaches men how to attract women by looking cool on their Instagram, not simping and acting confident. He acts like he's the first guy to figure out that women want the guy who has all the women around him.
There's nothing else on the planet more powerful in official dating than that concept.
There's 7 different things that you can do to trigger a woman to chase you, and they have nothing to do with money. It has nothing to do with being good looking or any of these things that guys think that they need. They think like, I have to have this, I have to have this, and they don't. If you know the tweaks, it's actually a lot easier than guys think.
Who knows if it's a good course or not, but Dan's lifestyle is certainly difficult to replicate. Either way, Dan's got to find something new to pursue now that he lit all of Ignite's money on fire. Maybe he can join Billy McFarland for Fire Festival too. Thanks for watching.